This is a podcast by the News Minute, and you are listening to South Central.
Hello and welcome to South Central, a TNM podcast where we put the South at the center. I am Dhanya Rajendran, your host. In this week's episode, we look at how the Bengaluru's outsider versus local debate is flaring up again. And then we look at the attack on the Supreme Court by Vice President Dhankar and members of the BJP. We ask the question, is this to intimidate the top court? To all those watching, remember that we both are platforms that are completely subscription driven. So if you are watching from India, then go ahead, click that QR code. It's not a lot of money. It's just 500 rupees per month. You also have a lot of other options to look at. You can take subscription for both Newslaundry and the News Minute. And if you're watching this from abroad, then go to the description. There is a specific link on which you can click and become a subscriber. Now let me introduce the people in the studio. My co-host, Pooja Prasanna, the reporting head of the News Minute and the anchor of Let Me Explain.
Hello.
Joining us is investigative journalist and co-host of the show, Leena Reghunath.
Hello, Dhanya.
We have a special guest today. It's Nithin Kamath.
Yes.
Not the rich one.
Not the rich one.
But Nithin Kamath, the comedian and writer. Hi, Nithin.
Hello, Namaskara. What's up?
Good. So, do you get mistaken for Nithin Kamath?
Yes.
The real rich one?
Yes. Usually they ask my name, then my bank balance, and then they verify. It's like a KYC people do with me. Very recently also, somebody mistook me for Nithin Kamath. They called, they're like, Nithinji, hello. And I'm like, yes. And they're like, how are you? How's your health? I'm like, I'm good. Like, you should come to Delhi. Next time if you come to Delhi, you should stay at my house. I'm like, sure, I guess. And it's like, Nithinji, can I have your email and personal number? I would like to invite you to my daughter's wedding. I'm just like, cool. I think my career is upgraded. The whole time I'm thinking I'm being invited to perform at a wedding where I was mistook for Nithin Kamath, CEO Zerodha. So,
Okay.
not fun.
Anisha, Sheth, not mistaken for anybody. Bureau Chief, Karnataka of the News Minute. Welcome, Anisha.
Hello.
So we're going to start the show on a sober note because yesterday India saw a really deadly terrorist attack in which 26 tourists were shot dead in Pahalgam in Kashmir. Even as we speak, things are unraveling. The Prime Minister has cut short his visit from Saudi Arabia. He's back in India. Amit Shah, the Home Minister, has been holding meetings ever since yesterday. So it's shocked the entire country. We have had casualties from people across from different states because there were many tourists from South India, from North India, from all parts were there. In fact, we have spoken to some of the relatives of the South Indian tourists who were there. And so most of our headlines this week will be on Pahalgam itself. Pooja?
Yeah, a total of 26 people at the time of recording have been killed. 3 from Tamil Nadu injured. Government sets up special help center in Tamil Nadu House in Delhi. This is to assist people, families of people who are there. Karnataka government to send special flight to bring back those stranded in Pahalgam. We also saw how some of the airline companies have shot up their prices, some 30 to 35,000 rupees per ticket, which is terrible exploitation. 2 from Andhra Pradesh shot dead by militants. 1 from Kerala killed, and some of them are still missing. And the government has also set up a helpline. They are trying to locate people who are there, coordinate with their families and things like that.
I spoke to Pallavi. Her husband was one of the people, Manjunath Rao, who was actually shot dead. She said that her son, who's 17-year-old Abhijay, and Manjunath were there at Pahalgam. And they were going for a pony ride. So all 3 of them went near the pony when the son said that he is feeling hungry. So Manjunath and Pallavi moved towards a shop to buy some snacks for their son. And then what happened is the father was a bit confused what to buy. So he told Pallavi, why don't you just go back and bring Abhijay to select what he wants. While she was walking back to the son, she heard bullet shots. And when she turned back, her husband was lying on the floor. She told me that she ran back to him. By then he had been shot on the neck. And when the terrorists were around, so she said he was shot from a distance. But by then the terrorists came nearby and she yelled at them saying that kill me too. Then they said we won't, go tell Modi. So a lot of people have come forward and said that they were not shooting at the women and children. They identified the tourists. And one of the women said that they asked if he was a Muslim. When he said no, they shot him dead. So there is, of course, a lot of things which are being said now. But I saw on various media groups that As of now, journalists are not being allowed near Pahalgam. So I think we'll have to wait for some more time for proper reports to come. But piecing together whatever we see, this is what has been happening. It's a dastardly attack, and I wonder how India is going to respond to it now.
For me, what struck me is that this location, right, Pahalgam, where the shootout happened, it is called the mini Switzerland, right? It is the heart of Kashmir's tourism. And this is where the Kashmiris and people from the other parts of India interact the most. These are the places where interactions happen. So this is an attack at any kind of normalcy, any kind of people-to-people contact that could happen, and perhaps some animosity coming down. So this is struck there, number one. Number two is also, if for those who have seen the area, it is not an area that can be accessed by vehicles. You have to either go on a pony or you have to trek for about 5 kilometers, which means that the terrorists had planned this properly. They have taken their time. They've gone through the forest to that opening, that meadow sort of a place. And my question is, where are our forces? This was a major intelligence failure. And it is not politicizing the issue if we ask these pertinent questions, because that's what people supporting the government shoot back at us. The people who've suffered are looking for answers once the grief kind of subsides. And people have to answer. You can't just keep saying revenge, revenge. Where is accountability? That is something that is shouting for me.
In fact, I was at Pahalgam just 3 weeks ago on a holiday. I went to a different valley called the Aru Valley. This happened in a different place. But there was a lot of army personnel and police around. In fact, I went during Eid, so I personally thought there were more army personnel in Pahalgam than even in Srinagar. But all the reports that I read today said that there were no police personnel or army. In fact, I think Pallavi has also spoken to TV9 Kannada, where she said that there was nobody there. It was the locals who helped them at that time. So these questions have to be raised. In fact, I was thinking now that when we were covering terror attacks, and for people thinking, what terror attacks have you covered? There was a time when there were terror attacks in Hyderabad, in Bengaluru, in Pune. I've covered all that. I mean, Thaddeum David and Nazir in Kerala, and so many of the, the terrorists and their trajectory we have followed. I remember that time when there was any sort of terrorist attack, we would be told to first find out if there was any kind of intelligence bureau or raw input or some sort of an intel input which said that an attack was likely to take place. Then after we find there was an intel, then of course it is who is to blame, right? Did you not take this intel seriously? But I find that reporting completely missing, at least in TV channels, because I feel there's a reticence to now ask any questions. In fact, I saw somebody tweeting, one of the journalists tweeting that, those who are against Kashmir files, they now know that this is truth. I mean, is that the first thing to say? People who opposed a movie, are they the ones responsible for the attack? It's about, and also I was watching Aaj Tak, one of their very senior reporters, he was reporting that these 4 terrorists who are believed to be from Pakistan, apparently now intelligence also believes that they were involved in the October 2024, there was a construction site tunnel which was bombed, and 1 doctor and 6 local workers that died. There is the same group, or at least part of that group, which did that terror attack in October 2024, who've returned in 2025, or at least stayed back, because there are also reports that they were fully equipped. They had these bags with food and water, dry fruits.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I think it is about an intelligence failure. That is what is most striking.
Yeah, I think it's a time where emotions are going to ride high, right? And the first reaction is of shock and sadness at the amount of lives lost. But as journalists, as TV studios should do, is to hold the government and expect the government to come up and say what kind of intelligence failure led to this in one of the most militarized zone in the world, that Kashmir is. And after all the claims that normalcy has returned, there is some kind of economical revival of that place through tourism and everything. The most hardest who is going to be hit by this is the locals themselves. And asking government these kinds of questions from journalists does not have to be submerged into the cries of nationalism or vilifying or a community or any of those things. But these are necessary questions. And I think earlier what we would see after such major terrorist attacks is that government would put out statements saying that, we had this kind of an information and and this was and we were not able to prevent it, or some kind of logic through. But to let your own party members or your troll armies to whip up sentiments without reining them in at this point will also, I think, some of that blame the government will have to shoulder.
Yeah, what was sad is that troll army, as always, also is part of people from our fraternity. Everybody from the Supreme Court, for just hearing the case of abrogation of Article 370, was held responsible. The opposition is held responsible.
The Supreme Court has also been held responsible pushing elections in Jammu Kashmir. A lot of the anchors are saying that why did you push for elections in Jammu Kashmir? What could these elections have really achieved? Look at what happened immediately after election.
But my question is that this still is the jurisdiction of the army, which is under the union government. So literally everybody else but the union government will be held responsible. And this is no joke, right? It's not a small matter. 26 people have died. Imagine the kind of trauma that they've gone through to see their family members being shot in front of their eyes.
In fact, this man, Ramachandran, who died in Kerala, I think the Malayalam media is reporting that the wife has not been informed about his death yet because she's not well herself. So he had gone to Kashmir with his grandchildren and daughter, and the fact that he's dead has not been informed to the wife yet. It's only when the dead body reaches the house, or maybe perhaps before that. So all these families are really dealing with that kind of tragedy, and I think at this moment what we need is responsible reporting, questions to be asked properly, and to not make anyone the fall person for it if they are not, right? It is a group of terrorists. I think part of the Lashkar-e-Taiba has already taken a responsibility. A front of Lashkar-e-Taiba. And of course, questions have to be asked to the Pakistan army, because the army chief did make certain remarks which were very, very problematic in the recent past. So these questions have to be asked, but the whole effort now is to vilify, right? That has to be stopped. Okay, so I think now we'll go to the first topic of South Central. So in fact, I decided on this topic on Sunday because there was a video which is doing this rounds of a man who is a Hindi speaker, I guess, and he's very angry and he's telling his auto driver that if you have to live in Bangalore, you should know Hindi. That's the reason why I chose the topic on Sunday, and I told Pooja that we'll discuss this. And on Monday, we come to office and we discover this whole fracas of this IAF wing commander, Shiladitya Bose, who goes on his Instagram, puts out a video where his bloodied face is there. And then he says that he was attacked by a person. He and his wife were attacked and abused. Everybody was shocked. There was a lot of outrage around it. And again, it became a Kannada versus outsider debate because Shiladitya Bose, the wing commander, specifically kept saying Kannada, Kannada. And he also said that I am very heartbroken at what is happening around me. I had great respect for Kannada, Karnataka, etc. But then it was proved within a few hours that it was only half truth. That a lot of stuff he said was either outright lies or they were exaggerations, because he said, I did not retaliate. He also said that the people around him, the other Kannadigas, were also abusing him, which is not true. We saw from the visuals that the other people were really trying their best to stop that attack. So, this happens sporadically, but this Bengaluru outsider versus local debate is always there, right? I mean, for the last 5-6 years, I think it's coming and going, and now last 1.5-2 years, it's there almost every month. We see some new incident and this discussion comes up. So for many Kannadigas, this isn't just about language. It's really about erasure. There is a fear among locals that their city, their culture and their identity is being sidelined. So is Bengaluru a welcoming metropolis, a city? Or is it becoming a city where the original residents are feeling threatened? Or was this feeling always there? In fact, I recommend that all of you should read this fantastic story that Anisha and Shivani Kawa, my colleague, had done. When I read the story today, I felt newly proud of that story I was telling her. It's a detailed account of how, this whole tension with outsiders has been there since the 1960s. But it's taken different shapes over the years. And now the latest outsider, who also is quite aggressive in one way, is that one particular kind of North Indian. We'll discuss more about it. But Anisha, tell me, how has this changed over the years?
Yeah, so there is a historical insecurity of sorts because, the Kannada-speaking areas were divided across like 5 different administrations historically. You have the Bombay and the Madras presidencies and the Kingdom of Hyderabad, the, Mysore Wadayar Kingdom and the Kingdom of Coorg. So it took a while, in the early 1900s, there was a feeling among people that, all the Kannada speaking areas should be brought under a single administrative unit. So that movement acquires momentum at the time, and, I suppose the earliest sentiment of, the earliest Kannada movement was about that, unifying all of the Kannada speaking areas into one administrative unit. And when that happened with, after independence and the reorganization of states, there was still a certain kind of, fight for, at least in Bangalore, with regard to cultural dominance, where Tamil speakers were perceived to be culturally more dominant in Bangalore. So, in the 50s and 60s, you see these demands that this annual Ramotsava festival that happened, they just went by, where, Tamil classical singers, there was a movement to say that, we should not have Tamil classical singers, we should only have Kannada speaking classical singers and so on. Then in the cantonment area of Bangalore, you have these demands that, Tamil films should not be shown in the theatres, and, there should be only Kannada films being shown there. But slowly, as you see that there's a gradual shift towards economic concerns, with Bangalore being, the hub of public sector units, defense, military establishments and so on. Then again, you see this language conflict play out, but now over jobs. So there was a perception that, there were more Tamil speakers and more Malayali speaking people hired by PSUs. But then, the Sarojini Maheshi Commission comes about and actually dispels that myth. By the time of the 80s, most public sector units actually hired more Kannada speaking people on the rolls rather than Tamil or Malayalam speakers. So these conflicts over jobs have just become more and more intense, because you see that the economy shifted with the liberalization of the 1990s. And then also simultaneously you have, the collapse of agriculture as a result of that shift in neoliberal policy, the shift towards neoliberal economics. So now it's become like an argument over, that fight for economic resources, land, water, all of these things have acquired a kind of belligerence on all sides, where nobody is willing to listen to another person. So today when people talk, they're talking in terms of, like, you hear people, we pay taxes. We are the ones who made Bangalore what it is. If without us, you guys would be nothing. So there was one video like this sometime, a couple of months ago, where, this woman was heard saying all these things. So this belligerence is coming from all sides, and is just feeding into, everybody else's, anger and belligerence and so on. So today, that is the language that is being used, that, we have a right to be here. But, so if you want to be here, then you have to respect us. Some of it is legitimate because people do feel disrespected. Like our story shows that, and the data is outdated because the census hasn't been done. The last census hasn't been done. So according to 2012 data, we see that 51% of Bangalore's population is actually made up of migrants. But if you look closely at the data, most migrants are actually from within South India.
No, let me just explain the census. So, Anisha, give the 2011 numbers, where 51% of people are migrants and 49% are Bengalurians, of people from Bangalore, the locals, right? But it's 51% migrants, of which almost over 60% are people from within Karnataka itself. Yeah. And then there are people from other southern states, but it could have changed. From 2011-24, there has been a great change.
Yeah, we just don't know. There's nothing to fall back on to say either which way what has happened now.
Nithin, you are someone who I can't say lives on social media, but social media is a big part of your life. So you do see how the interaction there are, right? Yes. Do you think that's also driving a lot of this problem?
It is, because at this point, what I believe is anything related to Kannada, Karnataka or Bengaluru has become a keyword of sorts, where the second you see Bengaluru mentioned, Kannada mentioned, people just stay and look at that post, right? And when, if you have to kind of grab some eyeballs, people sometimes just make anything into a Kannada issue, like we discussed with the Shiladitya Bose issue, right? Like they just lace Kannada sentiments into it, or make it a language issue, or make somebody a victim of a Kannada based or like a language based hate. So what's happened now is on social media, anytime, including the Pahalgam attack, people are like, it didn't matter what language you spoke and everything. There's no reason to bring language into it. So at this point, they're like, okay, maybe if we mention Kannada here, maybe if we mention Bengaluru here, we'll get some more eyeballs, and that will make it a social media engagement and everything. By the time the facts come, the damage is already done. The reputation for Kannada is already tarnished, and people they've gone ahead with their own tangents and their whole narratives and everything. So at this point, social media is like, at this point, what I believe is all the activists, rightfully posting, are only posting to inform other Kannadigas, because at this point we've understood nobody else is relating to us. There's that popular sentiment that goes that everybody's regionalist when it comes to their language, but becomes a nationalist when it comes to Bengaluru.
So you are saying that that there is already an unfair perception that Bengalurians are too violent towards people who have come here, that Kannadigas are too demanding or whatever?
No, yes, because what is echoed, what is amplified is the anti-Kannada sentiment. So by the time we speak up for ourselves, the damage is already done. That's what is happening.
No, I agree with him, because, the number of jokes, the number of memes that you see elsewhere.
Yeah.
What is more dangerous on Bangalore roads? Potholes or people attacking you for not speaking Kannada. I find that extremely frivolous and irresponsible. And these are people making these comments without understanding the history of Bengaluru. Like Anisha rightly pointed out, we are no strangers to plurality, to migrants. The same 2011 census that we were talking about says that Bengaluru has 107 languages. As a district, Bengaluru urban has the highest concentration of multiple language speakers. Now, the advantage of having people who speak Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, even Hindi, Urdu is a very dominant language in parts of Karnataka, is that many Bengalurians are multilingual, at least bilingual. So we are very tolerant to people who don't speak pure Kannada. Unlike a Tamil Nadu or an Andhra Pradesh, I won't say so much Kerala or Telangana. There is
Why do you say unlike what?
I'll tell you. There isn't one definition of there is a definition of who a Tamil is. There is a definition of who somebody residing in Andhra Pradesh is. Not for Telangana, not so much for Kerala. Now, in Karnataka, because of geography, because of having multiple, for a lack of better word, linguistic minorities, Anisha might take objection to that. But what I mean is there are Konkani speakers, there are Tulu speakers, there are Kurgi, Kodava speakers, there are Urdu speakers, Beri. These are people from Karnataka, Marathi speakers, right? But they're not technically Kannadigas. So we're very tolerant of people who don't speak one kind of Kannada. Yes, there is a lot of, this is not the right Kannada, that is the right Kannada, South Karnataka Kannada is the right Kannada. Yes, that happens a lot. But my limited point is this. There is still some level of tolerance to your earlier point where you said, is Bangalore still a welcoming city? I say a vociferous yes, despite the perception. Because,
I 100% agree.
Yeah, because, we are so overwhelmed when somebody makes an effort. We don't care what the accent is. We don't care if the words are right. We are just so happy that somebody is making an effort. Now, there is a language of disrespect that doesn't need translation. That gets translated very clearly. That is what people are objecting to, right? When somebody makes everything, oh, you people, and versus us people. You are unwilling to even acknowledge the local culture, forget respecting it. That is where these fissures happen. So my point is, though there has been so much of plurality over decades, why is it that it was never like this? It's because of this sense of entitlement was not so much before.
Sense of entitlement.
I agree to what Pooja is saying there. Let's take a step back and look at it in different ways, how these happens, the facts, the history, the numbers add a layer to it. But it's also like how she said, the emotions that are connected to it. Now, I don't belong to Bangalore or Karnataka. Whenever I come back, wherever I live and see the first coconut tree, my eyes just water and I'm like, what is this strangeness? Like, that there is an emotion that you connect to a place that you have some ownership to, right? And then when I come back to Bangalore and live here, I always wonder, that emotion is absent in me, right? So when these culture wars I read about it, I feel like, those people to whom this place belongs, they will have a certain ethos and a certain emotions connected to it, which the outsider, however much you explain, cannot. And I've been coming to Bangalore for years and years, and I've known people who have lived here 10 plus years, still can't understand will Kannada
You were saying
gottilla.
coconut tree in Kerala, right? Okay, I first thought, where are the coconut trees?
There are quite if you come to South Bangalore.
No,
You
yeah.
were saying that when you go to Kerala,
Yeah, that's that emotion stays, right, which will not get carried on into the migrant life. But then when you live 10 years in a country like US, 10 plus years, then you get citizenship, a claim to it. That place, you becomes an owner, a citizen by every right to, as any other person who has born and brought up there or have lived generations there. So those rights are where progressiveness go, right? It flows in that direction. But when you end up, like for me, in South India, there is, with due respect to all other big cities in South India, there is no place that has the cosmopolitan nature that Bangalore has. It's the most attractive place in South India. Well, Bombay is another city that can claim a cosmopolitan character, but what Bangalore has, that weather and the cosmopolitan culture and all the kind of attraction that this place has, I don't think very rarely any other. So everybody is charmed by the city, but when you come to the city, I think a certain kind of emotional investment you have to make and not bring your kind of cultural hegemony and then impose it on the people who are living there. And
I think that is the key word, right? When you impose a cultural hegemony, right?
Yeah.
Which is what people oppose it. Like, for example, I am a Malayalam speaker. I understand Tamil also very well. I came from Chennai to Bengaluru to work in 2009. I've been living here since then. I can't say I'm a fluent Kannada speaker or anything. I've never had a problem. Like, as long as the person next to me understands that I am making an effort to speak in their language, how much of a broken or good it is, I think they've been okay. Yeah. I mean, in fact, in Anisha's story, there's a quote from Milton Peters, I think, where he says, when people are saying, why are you not speaking in Kannada? They're not asking you to speak in some fluent Kuempu Kannada. They are asking you to know, minimum, respect that language enough to understand the basics.
Effort.
Can I come to take off from what Leena was saying about an emotional connect? See, most of these fights are happening, or at least this belligerence that you see from quote-unquote outsiders is an affluent crowd, right? These are the kind of people who can move from... You can move them from one gated apartment complex in Bangalore to another one in Hyderabad or Bombay or Delhi or wherever, and it will all look the same. It will all feel the same. They will go buy their clothes from one mall. It could be anywhere in the bloody world, right? So this is a kind of lifestyle that can be just, shifted en masse, completely from one city to another, unboxed, and you can start over all over again. Like, one of the things that I like most about Bangalore is its linguistic diversity. Any part of Bangalore you go to, like, you can hear, any part of the city that you go to, has a very distinct linguistic culture. And that for me is so rich, and I really like that part about the city.
But can I ask something? Like, is recently this being taken to really an extreme? Because I found it very, discomforting that all those English signboards and name boards and all was taken down, and then huge Kannada ones went up, whereas a lot of big migrant community here is having very difficulty in navigating the city because of that. And how is this kind of violence combined with this getting into the physical space and changing the language of it going to affect Bangalore?
And first, I'll just, before answering that, just echo what Anisha said. So there's been this thing of upbringing, right? Like, suppose I'm born and brought up in Karnataka, I'm by the time I reach my college and everything, I am familiar with at least two other language or their cultures. With respect to language, it could be media, it could be literature, it could be anything, or it could just be the fact that I grew up in like a bilinguistic or like a multilingual community, or what are of sorts, right? And then you see an average person from the North India would pretty much be accustomed to speaking Hindi in all the states he moved to, either for like a school trip or a college trip or whatever it is. And when they come, they are suddenly there is of course a culture shock, but the way they express the culture shock is sort at times feels condescending and feels neglect. So it comes with, what are you guys talking about? Right? And it's never about assimilating. Let me learn. Like, I was in Mumbai for a while, and 2 weeks into Mumbai, I was like, what are the Marathi movies I need to watch? What are the things? And I went right after Kantara became a thing, so they were like, "Arey bhai, Kantara, that is everything." And it was fun because that was the first Kannada movie they kind of know, or at least they watched. I think they had watched Kantara and KGF by then. And I was like, cool, now that you watch this, can I show you other movies and everything? So there was that cultural exchange. And I am showing interest, and none of these people know about Marathi culture. None of these people know about Mumbai culture. So I had to like struggle really, because if they become the keyhole to the city, and then they are not doing their job, so I lose out on the whatever the city has to offer. I'm flickering when I speak. I'm so sorry. So the idea being that Bangalore has a lot to offer, and the mentality that certain people come with is not to learn about it at all, and then they have certain attitude, and then they complain that the belligerence, what she said, or the behavioral shift in them. So that is one. And there is some sort of increase in the online, there is the divide, or the cause and the consequence of it is primarily because there is that term we use, like Kannadigaru Vishalar Devaru, very open-minded, very welcoming and everything, and it's persistent, it's evergreen, it's whatever, right? And for the longest time, through movies, through media, through hashtags, through protests, or whatever it is, there's always been like, try to learn Kannada, try to learn Kannada. There has been Facebook pages, there's been WhatsApp groups, there's been a lot of communities. And when people were not willing to learn and were not showing interest to learn, at least they were not opposing it, or were not imposing Hindi on top of it. Now it feels like that. That is the reason there is resistance. There is resistance because there's some sort of Hindi imposition that is happening. And that is not just your local day-to-day life. There's also that systematic implementation of Hindi only exams. There's some sort of reservations for like that non-Hindi speakers cannot access. So somewhere it feels like they're slowly trying to erase or dilute this language to nothingness. So that's what it feels. That's what the resistance is about.
But your question, Leena, the problem is that yes, sometimes it does get quite militant, where it becomes, violent and all of that, and nobody supports that.
And which is not the answer.
Which is not the answer. But there is, if you have to look at the cause for it, like we've been speaking, there has always been an insecurity in an average Kannadiga, right? And what happens is, at some point, parents thought that having access to English, even at the cost of your mother tongue, which is Kannada, will open up my child's future.
Right.
It is kind of a key for global success, which is true, which is why, so many call centers came to Bangalore, because people spoke more fluently in English. But what happened then is that now Kannadigas accepted English, as part of their daily discourse. But when other languages also started coming in, they felt that they need to put their foot down, especially administratively, because culturally Kannada is weaker if you look at it in Bangalore, as opposed to, because what are your vehicles of culture and language? Cinema, stand-up, right? These are vehicles where seamlessly people accept and learn a language. That is reducing in Bengaluru. So they feel administratively they need to kind of impose it in boards. But English is there. You can still read
No,
it.
and also because he's used the word imposition, right? I think that is the biggest issue. That it is not just about one Kannadiga or Bengalurian versus a North Indian. In that North Indian's attitude, perhaps during a small fight, right, or an auto ride, there is also a larger problem of the union government, not only of this day, previous also, trying to impose Hindi. So it is seen as as sort of a sign that this is also another Hindi imposition, right?
It's
that
a
anger is
simple
there,
thing,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now I go to Delhi. I speak in Hindi. Whatever Hindi I can speak, I will speak. I try and speak in Marathi when I go to Bombay, right? My bad Telugu, my bad Malayalam, I try, right? Now, a Tamil speaker, a Malayalam speaker doesn't come and tell an auto driver here, you speak to me in Tamil. Right, that is the problem. Let's face it. It is one of the official languages, but Hindi is a regional language in India. That, as long as people are contesting that fact, this animosity will continue.
Yeah, two things. I mean, so many people, Hindi-speaking people, actually expect people to talk back to them in Hindi, even when they are in places where that is not the local language. That I think is an irritant for many people.
But I think that's because of constant miscommunication.
Yeah,
That it is,
like even in
it is a
school,
national language.
yeah,
it
we
is
were taught
a
that
Bhasha.
it's a
yeah, like
deliberate
we also for the longest
miscommunication.
time
Very
had
senior
that, right?
Bihari editors have corrected my copy and put in that Hindi is a national language, and I was like, no. Like, and I was writing about something in Tamil Nadu, and they started off with that line. I was like, you'll get me killed. This is such a misconception. But
And then there's that argument that because Bangalore is a metropolitan, why can't they accept every language? I mean, look at Chennai for that matter. Look at Kolkata for that matter. Look at Mumbai for that matter. Mumbai is also probably in the same bag as Bangalore as of now, because both of us are facing like the regional language quota or whatever. That I can because I know a bit of Tamil. I can survive a day in Chennai, and I know my experience in Chennai is only gonna get better if I know Tamil, because I can talk to them freely. I can talk to them, and I can get that warmth if I access what they feel is right. And it is adversely the same. If I resist and Tamil, and if I use Hindi instead, of course they'll go cold. So if I learn a bit about the Tamil culture, if I learn a bit about the language when I'm going to study, or when I'm going to, not as a tourist, not necessarily, because cool, a lot of foreign travelers and tourists, they come to Mysore, they want to learn Kannada because that feels better, and it feels like a bucket list or whatever. So people who come to Bangalore to study, to take up a job and everything, they have a resistance, and that becomes like it becomes a community in college. It becomes a WhatsApp group. It becomes a group where they keep discussing, and that becomes like an echo chamber of sorts, and that kind of spits out anger and spite to any point. And it obviously has the counterpart also.
So when this Shiladitya Bose's thing happened, forget the fact that everybody was also extra angry because he's a wing commander, and you have to feel immediately angry if something happens to a defense person, and they're in the border fighting for us. What is it? Uniform knows only one thing, which is valor. This is a prominent journalist tweet.
Let's name and shame.
No, but
Rahul Shivshankar.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the point
I heard
is
that multiple times on that show. My God.
yeah, but the point is, I realized at that time that there is one group of people who, anytime something small like this happens, or big happens also, they're immediately ready to brand people in Bengaluru as intolerant. Right? They're like, again, you have to get a passport to go to Bangalore.
A step further, I see tweets that, let's take our IT companies and get out of Bangalore. We can go to some other place. We built this place. I mean, the arrogance of it, and you expect people to still speak your language. At this point, it's become about autonomy, regional pride, and politics. And rightly so, right? Clearly, statistics show that across India, monolinguistic people are concentrated in Hindi-speaking states. That's your Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and the likes. As you come to non-Hindi-speaking, non-South Indian states, they still speak, two languages. In the Hindi states, it's over 90%. People who can speak only one language. Whereas South India, it is as low as 60 to 70%.
Let me just quickly make a point. Let's not forget that Hindi is also a construct of the census to some extent, because under the Hindi category, you have 100 plus languages, I think, listed. And let's also not forget that people who speak Bhojpuri or Maithili or whatever, their languages don't get recognition anywhere, and people still consider that they are also Hindi speakers. So I think we should also remember that category, these people who've been subsumed by Hindi.
No, but I just want to say, for those people listening, we also have an audience from North India, because this also gets played on News Laundry, that it's not like people in Bengaluru are just waiting for North Indians to just abuse them or attack them. I mean, these are just aberrations, right? Here and there, one or two incidents happen, and it gets played up in social media. The real anger or the frustration is towards government policies. And I think there's a problem there, because every time, an issue like this flares up, the government also will react in very questionable ways. Like,
it isn't just this government, right?
No, for example, the bill that they tried to bring in recently, where they said 50% of jobs have to be reserved for people from domiciles for managerial, and 75% for non-managerial. You interviewed Santosh Lal, the minister. Now, if you really wanted to bring in the law, you should have stuck your neck out. But they fell under industry pressure, and they immediately took it back. And such laws have been struck down in Punjab, in Andhra Pradesh. And the second, this KD, which is the Karnataka Development Authority, try to say that medical bills should be in Kannada. Now, those are not the knee-jerk reactions we should actually come to ensure that you strengthen your language, right? So I think the response from the government also has not been very
Leave it as me. If I may just add, that is the response of the Karnataka government.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, this is when a certain section is anybody who's cornered with your back towards the wall, you tend to try whatever you can. And also there's a bit of politics, you're trying to appease to a certain section. But look at how consecutive union governments have behaved. And I'm not saying this started with BJP. Congress governments from the time of independence across the country, in South, there are so many of these Hindi Prachar Sabhas. All of this is being done with taxpayers' money.
Hey, I studied 4 exams in Hindi Prachar
I have
Sabha.
also passed them, Prathama, Dvitiya and all
Yeah.
of that. Those are by choice. That's my entire point.
No, in Tamil Nadu, how they try to have 2-language policy,
Yeah.
which is when the entire thing broke out, right?
Yeah.
You were talking about assimilation before we started. So when you look at all this, how do you think that assimilation can happen?
So there is, since you mentioned politics, so the problem, what I think is Karnataka hasn't had a strong regional party with regional interests, right? So there's either been.
Aha, you have touched Pooja's heart, because Pooja's always for regional party in Karnataka.
Yeah,
Zindabad.
no, because who else will we cry to, right? So both the parties on either end are appeasing to national interest, and somehow their one fit has to involve Karnataka, and we have to fit ourselves into that bill, which will never happen. And the other regional party is mostly going to be power brokering, right? That's pretty much it. Yeah.
No, I just want to say that somewhere we found a silver lining. From JDS, one man went to Congress, became the chief minister, and turned Congress, a national party, almost to a regional party.
Which is Siddaramaiah.
Which is Siddaramaiah. So, what
No,
we
but
saw...
otherwise, you think people to people, how does that communication happen now? Because it seems to be getting broken more and more.
May I
Yeah.
put a point there? When I first moved to Delhi to live, people anywhere that I make a conversation, they would all stop by and say, how you're a South Indian, how's your Hindi so good? And I would say, I learned it from a great person. And they were like, who? And I was like, SRK movies that taught me Hindi. So the way that actually a language or a culture is, it's the soft way you put it, not the militant way. You know, how you can soft platform it is the way a language gets picked, right? And maybe what we need is like big cultural icons from Kannada, or, you know,
but there's a difference, right? See, these we're talking about people who are already here and not picking up the language. Now, you sat in Kerala, you watched SRK movies and you picked up a language is different from you are living here
Yes.
for 10 years, 15 years, and you still refuse to even learn basics, which I think applies to what Anisha is saying.
No,
That these are people who can just go from one gated community or one apartment to the other. They're not assimilating into the life of Bengaluru.
No, this is true, because people who come here, youngsters who I were quoting, like have lived 10 years, they have been in a technology institute where it was a gated community. They moved into an IT park, another gated community, and have lived here. They have claims of living here for more than 10 years, but they didn't need the language. But they would have picked up the language if there was a soft cultural, appeasement to learn that language.
Who's that onus on, right? See, if you build barriers around yourself, insulate yourself from local culture, local language, local identity, there's no way you will have interactions, because even the Kannadigas going into these complexes have to speak Hindi for employment. They don't get jobs if they don't speak Hindi in these households. So who's the onus on? They should break down that barrier, be part of communities.
But unless you have a necessity to pick a language, you don't need to, because
That is what Anisha
you
was
don't
saying.
need to
Where
speak
is
to a
necessity? You are
shopkeeper.
ordering through your app.
Bangalore invented all kinds of app to make living easy, where you don't need to have a human-to-human communication. So there is no incentive to learn that language anymore. You don't need it.
But when people create those incentives, they're called militant.
No, but I also want to actually bring
Nithin
in
Kamath,
another
the rich person in the room, wants to say something. Yes, Nithin.
No, I was just thinking about this one point. What is it? Yeah. So like your upbringing is fully dependent on what are you interested in, what are the interests that you're willing to pick and absorb, right? So what has happened is a lot of schools, Kendriya Vidyas and everything, don't have Kannada as a language, because they are mostly to people in the forces and everything. The kid will keep moving, the army people keep getting transferred and everything, and a lot of schools, kids only learn Kannada to just pass an exam. They are not absorbing anything from that language. And most of these schools have penalized, at least in the early 2000s, that people are like, you have to pay a fine if you speak Kannada in the school and everything. A bunch of my friends have had, right? So, I take a lot of pride in having read at least a part of Kannada literature, but a lot of Kannada literature is fully lost because people are no longer accessing it. The localites will. Though a lot of Kannada films just people are not watching. So the idea is eventually the so Kannada becomes a key to a whole vault, that is Kannada culture or Karnataka culture. A lot of, let's particularly talk about Bengaluru culture. So the key is being hidden, and the people are not looking for that key at all. So that upbringing is, as she said, the onus is on you to, like, you probably watched SRK movies out of passion, and like I learned Hindi because I watched Doraemon. So
You watch Doraemon Hindi?
sorry, man.
Oh my god.
Sorry, man.
Generation gap.
Yeah. Or Ninja Hattori, if that makes you better. Whatever.
No, Doraemon is
Doraemon, at least we know. We don't know the other guy.
Yeah.
No, so anybody wants to make any closing points, or you
Yeah,
don't have any jokes, or what about this?
I have a joke, but people are like, so, my God, wow, I don't want to talk about it.
Do you have to pay a ticket for your jokes now?
Yes.
We'll buy you coffee. Go for it.
Oh my God. See,
Free
the
for
incentive.
TNM
Done,
South Central
actually,
watches.
yeah.
Huh?
Love to perform.
Okay, no, I'm
Friends
kidding.
of journalism.
Yeah, Anisha, you want to add
There's
something?
just one last point. I mean, like, see, Hindi imposition historically from all union governments so far is one thing. Our, parties in Karnataka which have a nationalist orientation is also one thing. But let's not forget economic policy at a more local level in Karnataka by the Karnataka government for Bangalore. Okay. And also the real estate developers who began developing these kind of things and designing the city in such a way, right? Like there is research which shows that, this master plan, wherever it has been implemented in the city, has ended up creating areas where, you push out local people to make way for richer elite, particularly of the kind of, class that we're talking about, the ones who work in IT companies and so on. So that segregation of space is also structural. It's not also by choice in the sense that, okay, yes, rich people will live in gated communities and so on, and therefore isolate themselves from the rest of the world. But it's also structural in design. So unless you bring about a change to the economic policy of allowing huge business parks and things like this to take over large parts of your city, and then you have a separate housing infrastructure that is again similar in design, exclusionary, unless you make changes to this kind of way of thinking of your economy, of economic activity of people's lives, you're still going to end up, these conflicts are just going to get worse, I think. Because see, like Leena pointed out, why is it so bad today? Today we're looking at from the 1990s when the real estate boom started and so on. That was just when the economic inequality was starting. It's always been there, yes. It started to get wider at that point, and I think historically we are at possibly the widest point today, right? So when economic resources, job opportunities are so scarce, then there is definitely going to be antagonism from all sides, right? So the haves will want to protect what they have, and the have-nots will be like, where is our share, right? And I think that is a valid question to be asking of our governments, of planners, even intellectuals and, academics and so on, to put in place something that is going to make life bearable for everybody.
People look at this as a very complex issue. It is very complex.
Definitely.
But the solution, I think, is very simple. This push for Hindi is less about unity. I think it's more about authority, right? So what you can do if you are going to any other part of the country, not just Bengaluru, any other part of the country, the first thing you can do is not approach the locals from a place of superiority. That, I think, solves 50% of the problem. How well you speak a language, how much you relate to them is secondary. The fact that you're, talking to them as partners will get you like halfway there. The rest, they will teach you. I think that's the only solution.
The language of disrespect doesn't actually have words in it, right? Yeah.
The respect is what we're looking for, because at this point people feel like Kannadigas just knowing Kannada feel like second class citizens, and that is not a feeling we would like to have. That is not a feeling we are okay with. And when somebody who knows Hindi comes with that and uses it as a tool to just imply superiority, imply some sort of attitude, there is of course resistance, and that kind of becomes violent, that becomes militant as well, which is again wrong. There is that thing of India is a diverse country and everything, but at the same time you have to know to respect regionally, individually, before you celebrate this union of sorts, right? And you can't make Bengaluru a global status without respecting the local factor, the elements involved in it. So that way, the cultural education is really important to understand, to assimilate. Like there's not been a lot of songs about Bengaluru in Kannada. There have been 4 in Malayalam. And which is because they come, they enjoy, they have their college life and everything. They take a part of the city. They like to represent the city in everything. And end of the day, you see Bengaluru as what they depict as well, and only that keeps on getting louder. So there's not been enough representation for Kannada or Bengaluru in other culture anyway. Like I can't remember more than 3 Kannada characters in any of the Bollywood movies or anything. And if there is, it's either stereotyped or anything. So what, say, a South Indian stereotype, South Indian person faced in Bollywood with respect to stereotype or everything, I think Bengaluru is facing that on social media, where we are termed wrong for anything we speak. So including RCB for that matters, just because the captain spoke in Hindi, they're like, oh, your captain speaks Hindi, but how can you, and everything. So it's biting us back in some sort, but in the whole flow of it, the real issues are getting sinking. That's pretty much it.
In a parting thing, it is not Bangalore, it is Bengaluru.
Yes.
For people who mix that up.
Okay.
And
Thank you, Pooja. So that's the end of the first topic. You still did not tell us a joke.
About assimilation. About a joker.
About a joker. Oh, yo.
Full pressure now.
Full pressure. Kannada
She.
joke.
We'll translate.
You can't you can't press a switch and expect stand-up comedy to start.
Silly
No.
If
joke.
they ask me to do a live somewhere,
Yes, you
I'll
can.
do it.
Yeah, we all do it.
Silly joke or serious joke?
Silly.
PJs are an art.
Silly. That joke.
Yeah,
They were originally called PJs.
if somebody hits on actor Sudeep, what do you call him?
Hits on.
Hits.
Hits on or
If
hates on?
somebody hates on actor Sudeep, what do you call him? Hote kicha.
I knew that was coming. For once in my life, I guessed a PJ.
Very bad.
Thanks, man.
Very bad.
Okay, so that was a pretty long and passionate debate on the Kannadiga versus outsider discussion. Now we go on to the second topic on South Central, which is about the strained relationship now between the judiciary and, I should say, the BJP here, because first it was the Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar who made comments saying the Supreme Court is behaving like the super parliament. He was, of course, upset with the Supreme Court's verdict in the Tamil Nadu governor's case, where the court had prescribed a time limit for the governor and the president when it comes to bills. Then, of course, it was taken over by Nishikant Dubey, a BJP MP, who even went on to say that the Chief Justice of India is responsible for the civil wars taking place in the country. He went on to say the Supreme Court is taking the country towards anarchy. Though the BJP has distanced itself, BJP President JP Nadda has said that the party does not agree with Nishikant Dubey's comments. It's being seen as an intimidatory tactic that through people like Nishikant Dubey, the party is also using the language that it wants against the Supreme Court. But a lot of things have been thrown up, right? One is, of course, the use of Article 142 by the court, which is what Dhankar has questioned, saying that Article 142 is being used by the Supreme Court. He's also said that the court and judges are now above scrutiny, and it cannot be so. In fact, after his first comment, there was a lot of criticism, a lot of discussion. He doubled down, and he has almost made the same comments, and he has said that elected representatives are the masters of constitutional content and there is no authority above parliament. So joining us today on this discussion is lawyer Suhrith Parthasarathy. Suhrith practices in the Madras High Court. Suhrith, thank you for joining South Central. You must have seen all these comments both by the Vice President and of course Nishikant Dubey. First, what are your thoughts on the Supreme Court judgment on the governor issue? Did you feel that it was judicial overreach in any way?
Yeah, thanks, Dhanya. It's nice to be on here. Well, not at all. I don't think it was a case of judicial overreach at all. In fact, I think it's in the normal circumstances, it's a very straightforward judgment in that the Constitution is clear. Article 200 is clear. There is no discretion in the matter for the governor. When bills are sent to him, he must assent to them within a reasonable time frame. If he feels that it conflicts with some parliamentary law, he ought to have referred it to the president in the first place. Or if he felt that it suffered from some defect or the other, once again, he should have sent it back to the legislature for curing of those defects. But ultimately, the governor acts on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, that is the state executive, and which is the principle that the Supreme Court has really reaffirmed. I wouldn't even call it something path breaking in that sense. It is a reaffirmation of a long settled principle, a long settled constitutional principle, and indeed a constitutional convention too. So, where the judgment was really welcome is that obviously this logjam has been in play for a good 3-4 years now, and some of the laws go back to the previous AIA DMK's legislative acts, legislative bills. And therefore, there were about 12 bills which was simply languishing, and something had to be done. And I think the governor did have the opportunity to correct himself and to, act within the constitutional realm, even as the case was pending before the Supreme Court. But ultimately, I think they were left with little choice but to pass the order that they did. And it's likely that it will have ramifications with respect to other state laws as well. As to how that unfolds, we'll have to wait and see. But on Article 142 and on the use of Article 142, since you mentioned that in the introduction and since the court has invoked that provision here, it's not something, particularly surprising or particularly, again, shocking in any way. It's ultimately a power that is conferred under the Constitution to do complete justice between the parties. And I would actually go so far as to say that the court didn't actually have to invoke Article 142 explicitly here. Its writ jurisdiction had been invoked under Article 32. And once its writ jurisdiction had been invoked, it has every power and every discretion to issue these prerogative orders. And it could have issued the order that it did, which is that it effectively said that the bills would have been deemed to have been assented by the governor, even without explicitly invoking Article 142. And I think what we should also recognize here is that it's not just the Supreme Court that has this power, the power to issue writs and prerogative writs, but the high courts as well. And the Supreme Court judgment recognizes that.
No, but Suhrith, if you're saying that there was nothing path-breaking about it, the whole opposition is that this judgment did not just restrict itself to governors, but it went ahead and spoke about the president, right? That the president also should prescribe to a time limit. That is what the vice president has taken offense to, where he says that who are you to be telling the president, right? So do you think that way, perhaps the Supreme Court did touch a raw nerve by invoking the president's name too?
Once again, I don't think so. The president again acts on the aid and advice of the union executive, and the union executive's orders are binding on the president. And the president is like any other constitutional authority. These are all constitutional authorities. Now, for example, if the election commission, which is a constitutional body, were to stray and were to, perform perhaps an unconstitutional act, are we to say that the Supreme Court doesn't have the power to act as a check on the election commission or on the speaker? You have classification of bills as money bills, for example, which circumvent the role of the Rajya Sabha in many cases. Again, the Supreme Court has the power to test the discretion of the speaker in classifying a bill as a money bill. In some ways, though, this is really an age-old debate, right? We're often told that in a democracy, the will of the people is supreme, and that because governments are elected and laws are passed by representatives of the people, a court which is not an elected body ought not to overrule either the parliament or the executive. Now, obviously, achieving a strict separation of powers is a very, very difficult task, and it's something that our constitution's makers had to grapple with over a substantial period of time. But our constitutional design is such that the judiciary, which comprises an unelected body of members and judges, will act as a check on not just executive excesses, but also legislative excesses. And which is why the Constitution explicitly confers the power under Article 32 on the Supreme Court and under Article 226 on the High Courts to issue what are known as prerogative writs. The courts can issue various kinds of writs, and these writs are issued to other constitutional authorities all the time. And why was the president given a timeline here? Again, I don't think it's as much the president that's been given the timeline as it is the union executive that's been given the timeline. When a bill is sent from a governor of a state to the president, let's say for the president's consideration, then it is the president, and then it is the union executive whose aid and advice the president will have to act on. And it's for that purpose that this timeline has been conferred. Otherwise, you can have what are known as these pocket vetoes, right? A president can sit on a bill indefinitely for 4 years, 5 years. Where does the will of the people go in such a case? Ultimately, if the will of the people is represented by...
No, should that have come from the parliament itself? For example, should they have legislated on this and said that a time limit has to be set in Article 200. Should it have gone to Supreme Court? Like last week also we were discussing on South Central, where one of our guests, Mohandas Pai, by the way, I have lots of emails to read this time because we have got so much of viewer feedback as we invited Mohandas Pai on the show. But he was saying that it should be, and in fact a lot of people have been saying this all across the media, that the Supreme Court should have left the legislating of this to the Parliament itself and not said anything about a time limit.
No, again, I don't think this is an act of legislating. I think there's a subtle difference here that we should bear in mind. The court's role is to interpret the Constitution, right? And the Constitution is filled with a number of what are called, and what one has increasingly described as a constitutional silence, where it's silent about certain things. But there is still an intrinsic requirement for constitutional authorities to act within the boundaries of those provisions. Now, Article 200, for example, when we're speaking in the context of governors, let's say, Article 200 says as soon as possible. Now, what does as soon as possible mean? It's up to the courts to interpret it. And it's because, and ultimately the court is performing its role as an interpreter of the Constitution. And that is what our constitutional design really envisages. That the courts will act not just as a check on executive and legislative excesses, but also as an interpreter of the Constitution. And this is really not the first time that a presidential action or something is coming up for judicial review. There have been numerous instances in the past. For example, there have been cases of mercy petitions, which were left languishing for many years, where there were convicts on death row simply waiting for their mercy petitions to be decided, which were pending at the level of the President of India, where the Supreme Court has intervened. There have been cases where the material, presidential actions have been tested on whether or not it is in keeping with the material that was supplied to the President by the Union Executive. So this is really not the first time that there's some sort of a presidential action has come under judicial review.
Couple of points that I wanted to bring in here. If we look at the first big noise that was made by Nishikant Dubey, where he said that Supreme Court is leading the country to anarchy and religious war, exactly the terms that he used. And then he went on to say in Ayodhya, they kept asking for us for papers and for a masjid that is built by Mughals. Where do we? So even with a judgment that has come largely in their favor, the discontentment of having to go to a court and fight it under the law is still, I think, boiling inside them. And this is not new with political parties. When Sanjay Raut lost, the Shiv Sena member lost the election, I think the statement I wanted to read out from the courts, he said, if anyone is responsible for this, it is D.Y. Chandrachud. History will never forgive him. So all the political parties who have sometimes faced the actions of fallout from these cases and how it was decided by the court have went out and made these statements. But what I think went a bit further is when the Vice President himself makes a comment of how this is. And he said Article 142 has become a nuclear missile against democratic forces available to judiciary 24/7. There is always a back and forth with authoritarian governments, like, when they begin and the court strikes it down, like, are we not the final person to legislate? And I think that is what is happening here in the back and forth.
I'm looking at this entire thing from a political lens, and let's not, while this entire fight is positioned as VP Dhankar fighting for the president's office, we cannot separate politics from it. His track record, he himself is a governor who, when he was the governor of West Bengal, constantly made it very difficult for an elected government to function, much like what, Governor Ravi is doing. And the buzz in political circles is that while R.N. Ravi is auditioning for the post of VP, maybe Jagdeep Dhankar is auditioning for something bigger, right? But on a serious note, what he's said, what he's done has undermined judicial independence, right? And how selective it is, because this is not the first time Article 142 has been invoked by the Supreme Court. It has been done in the past, including the Ram Janmabhoomi Babar Masjid case, then there was no problem because it was largely in their favor. It's been done in 2014 when it said that, Lokpal bill has to be, brought into motion. Then nobody had a problem. Now suddenly they've woken up and they're trying to separate powers. And this for a government that has, if I may say, largely had favorable rulings in their, in their favor. So it seems a little, it's almost high-handed for him to come and say that. He's had many run-ins, he's made many comments against the Supreme Court in the past as well. But I feel that there is something larger at play here. The government doesn't like being challenged even a little bit. They used to not having any pushback.
But then JP Nadda did come and say that Nishikant Dube's statements are not welcome.
What does that mean? Did he take any action against Dube? Because Dube was not the only MP, mind you. There was another MP by the name Dinesh Sharma who also kind of tested waters. To me, this is a dipstick, Dhanya. They're testing the waters. They'll keep pushing the boundary to see how far they can go. Till the party takes action, these remarks mean nothing.
So, Suhrith, I was listening to an interview of Mahesh Jethmalani on one of the channels, and the anchor was Rajdeep Sardesai. I kept asking him that, do you think there's a way in which the Supreme Court is being intimidated by the ruling party, right? And Mahesh Jethmalani, of course, who's a BJP person or sympathizer.
MP
No, he's
too.
also an MP,
Yeah.
right? So, what I want to say is that he kept saying that there's no way the Supreme Court can feel intimidated. It doesn't work like that. But is that really so? When there's constant tension like this, where you have the Vice President himself making these remarks, which then, of course, is repeated by a lot of people, right? Does that then weigh upon the court? We have also seen Justice Gavai, who's set to take over as an ex-CJ, also make remarks now.
Yeah, I mean, I have a slightly, I wouldn't say this different approach, but I would also sort of think on the same lines. It's difficult to comment on whether the court's going to be intimidated by comments made by other constitutional actors, etc. Because ultimately, some of these tussles, if we look at it from a historic point of view, there have always been tussles in a democracy, and there's always been push and pull between various different constitutional authorities. And, we've had in the past Mohan Kumar Mangalam's plan of having a committed judiciary. We've had chief justices being people who were otherwise in line for elevation as Chief Justice of India being superseded. We've had all kinds of battles between governments and the judiciary throughout independent India's history. I don't think just because a vice president comes out and says something that the courts are going to be intimidated. I wouldn't think that one should go that far. And also on the, what does one have? The only way to really resolve all this is if there are comments that are being made by certain quarters, then you respond to it through the use of speech really, and through a reasoned critique, which is what one looks to do by analyzing this judgment. And when you analyze this judgment, what you find is that it is not judicial overreach. And I suppose there are many lawyers across India, there are many other sensible persons across India who've commented to that effect as well. And while it doesn't behoove a person of such a high constitutional position to be expressing these kind of opinions in the public domain, I'm not sure there's a solution to this beyond a political solution at some level, right? Like in the sense, what can the court do if the vice president is saying something, or if some other person is saying something? You really have to brush it aside and go on with your jobs. I don't think that we should be spending too much time worrying about what X or Y is saying, even if it's someone as high as the vice president.
But Suhrith, can I put a question to you? Whereas you say that this decision is not path-breaking in any way, but in much of the legal circles, this was received with a lot of surprise and sort of jubilation that that the court has strongly come forward and set this deadline for this constitutional authority. So has that surprised a lot of and this kind of statements that we see coming from BJP politicians and later the vice president himself, has they in turn be rattled that the court is now showing some sign of a spine under the new CJI, and are they getting rattled, which is the reason why these kind of statements are coming?
Two responses to this, Leena. First, what I meant by saying that it's not heartbreaking is not in the sense of how it doesn't how it's not an important judgment. I don't mean to undermine the judgment. It's a vastly important judgment, and it could have deep ramifications, as we discussed, for other bills passed by other states. We've already have the Kerala bills that are up for debate before another bench in the Supreme Court, and it'll have a really, really deep bearing on how those cases are decided. Obviously, the union government might try to distinguish it on facts. The petitioner will try to make use of the judgment, and it is going to have a serious impact. What I meant, though, was to say that it was largely a simple interpretation of the constitutional provisions. I did not think that it was an especially complicated question of law. Sorry, what was your other point? I just sort of lost.
Is the court showing some spine under the new CJI, and is that why?
Again, this bench was composed and constituted and was hearing this matter even earlier. It was hearing this matter even under the earlier CJI. And I think the hearings went on for quite some time. And as we discussed earlier, there were opportunities for course correction even during the course of the hearings. And I don't know if what kind of other judgments are going to come from the court, etc. But it's certain this judgment is one certainly to be welcomed, in the sense that obviously the court would have also looked at it the other way, right? Like, now, what other option did the court really have? Assume that the court had said, look, we can't give positive directions to the governor of a state. We'll simply interpret the constitution, interpret the provisions, and say that he has very limited to no discretion in the matter. The state executive has recommended that he assent to the bills, but he continues to keep it in his pocket and has committed what is a pocket veto, which is wrong. So therefore, we now send it back to him for a reconsideration and let him grant assent as soon as possible. Now then, we're in a situation where the governor is, let's say, again, 3 months down the line, 4 months down the line, he hasn't acted. You can't possibly have a situation where a governor is in contempt of a court, right? So, which is sort of a court's order, which is why I think the court was sort of compelled in this case also to issue a deeming fiction. And when it issued a deeming fiction, I don't think it is stepping into the shoes of the governor. It's merely saying that once the state executive has directed that assent be given, he didn't have much discretion in the matter anyway. And therefore, it ought to be deemed to have been assented to. And in that sense, maybe it is of substantial precedential value in that such an order may not have been passed in the past. But I think it's certainly a judgment that's going to have deep ramifications.
But Dhanya, I feel we haven't seen the end of this, because even if the Supreme Court was to kind of, not look into this too much, the fact that he's reiterated, and
who's he? Jagdeep Dhankar.
Jagdeep Dhankar. The fact that Jagdeep Dhankar has reiterated, doubled down, as you said, shows that there is something that he's trying to achieve. And as the vice president and as also the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha, he's seen as someone who sides with the government. He's seen as a person who's partisan, right? This is something, it's a larger, stronger message. Until the Supreme Court shows it, they will not.
No, the chronology, Samjhe, is very much there in this. For example, you have the Vice President saying very strong things against the Supreme Court. Then you have Nishikant Dubey and other politicians.
Nishikant Dubey is not a nobody, by the way.
Yeah. He heads at least one.
He's a bellwether for the government.
He heads one of the parliament committees also.
Well, yeah.
Then you have another BJP MP. Then yesterday, when the Pahalgam attack happened, there were at least one or two big media anchors, including Arnab Goswami, who were directly attacking the Supreme Court, saying that why did you listen to Article 370 cases ad nauseum? Why did you allow the elections in Kashmir, and holding the Supreme Court responsible for what is happening in Pahalgam also? But Suhrith, my final question to you is that, because you spoke about, the governors could have been in contempt of court. I want to ask you about contempt of court. Now, one way in which this is going to be dealt with is to have contempt of court petitions against Nishikant Dubey, and perhaps, I don't know about the Vice President, but Nishikant Dubey, court is going to hear a plea, I think, next week. Going that path, would that really help? Because you said what is needed now is a political dialogue.
Yeah, look, I think we also have to be a bit principled about these things, right? Ultimately, people who are exponents of, believers in free speech have doubled down or have come down quite strongly in criticism of the court's contempt powers. Now, it's one thing to hold someone in contempt for infringing an order or for willfully violating an order. But contempt for speech, we've seen how it's been misused in the past as well. And I think there are deep problems with the law itself. So is that the solution? I'm not so sure at all. And I don't think one should consider that as a particularly as the solution really to this issue. And I do think at some levels that these kind of battles do happen in a democracy, and we should be willing to not overlook them, but respond to them through other democratic means and respond to them within that democratic sphere. I understand that. I mean, obviously the comments are way off the mark. They're very, very problematic, and they kind of do undermine the Supreme Court at many levels. But I don't think that the Supreme Court's larger prestige and authority is necessarily lowered simply because one member of parliament or simply because one or the other members of the political party in power makes disparaging statements. I think the Supreme Court's shoulders will have to be broad, and it's already done its job by giving the verdict that it has. And there'll be other cases which come up before it, where either parliamentary or legislative executive excesses will have to be checked, and the court will have to simply go on doing its job within the constitutional realm. I don't think it should expend too much energy on matters such as this. But of course, it will be before the court, it will be sub judice, and one shouldn't comment any more on it in terms of the merits of the matter itself. But I'm not sure that it's necessarily the solution.
No, I think one thing that we miss completely is that it's not the governor a judgment which has made BJP more angry. It's actually the Waqf one.
Yes.
The temporary stay
status
on
quo
the status quo on the act. That is what has triggered Nishikant Dubey to make these remarks. It was not the governor judgment.
That's why I said they're so unused to any kind of pushback that even a little bit they can't digest.
Yeah. Okay, so the second topic is over. Now we move on to the letters, and let me warn you, we have quite a few because last episode we had Mohandas Pai as the guest, and I do write an email to those who are our subscribers and even people who have subscribed to our emails, and the topic was a different kind of guest on South Central. The reason we called him was very simple. Every time we were told that, oh, you guys are just all agreeing with each other. Minor points you may disagree, but there's no one really right-wing or someone who...
We didn't want to be an echo chamber, basically.
Yeah, so I thought let's experiment by calling Mohandas Pai. And at least in one of the topics, which is about startups, we knew that he is going to be against the government. So Pramod Biligiri, who's a subscriber, writes, in your April 18th podcast, I enjoyed the discussions about corruption in Karnataka. It was good to see Mohandas Pai give many concrete examples about this based on his own experiences. He also gave insider perspective. Please continue to invite subject matter experts for segments like this. Thank you, Pramod. This is perhaps the only letter which says this. Let me read the rest. Kirti Raja says, I thought the day I'll be writing feedback for you guys might never come because I loved the quality of discussions in your podcast so far. You gave the nuances of the issue and specific details which will be usually not discussed anywhere else, and the guests, as far as I have seen, were not loudmouth. They were polite even when they disagree. They bring valuable angle and clarity to subject. This week's show kind of derailed in all the above mentioned aspects. I didn't get clear details of the issue from the discussion. She's also talking about the Hafta podcast. I think Hafta was on the Bengal violence and the National Herald case. And Mr. Pai kind of brought out loudmouth TV debate vibes to the table. So I stopped watching it midway and gaining tolerance to watch the rest of the podcast. Kirti, I hope you gain that tolerance and you watch the rest of the podcast. Now next, she also said, I've been listening to you guys for some time. I got the subscription 2 months ago. Your work, I found you guys through News Minute Tamil. And the work is quite excellent. Thank you, Kirti. To all of you, do become subscribers. It's very, very important because all of us can keep complaining day and night that journalism is dead in this country. Where are journalists? But there are pockets where people are trying to do, and we hope that we are one of those small pockets. So if you do not become a subscriber, it becomes very difficult for us. The QR code is there. Click on it. If you are watching this from abroad, then there is a link in the description. Do click on that. Mayank Pawar. Extremely grateful to you and your team for the brilliant work you guys do. Thanks for giving a voice to the powerless. Providing a platform to a habitual liar, bully and hate monger like Mohandas Pai is very disheartening. Hopefully there's a retrospection. So I did write back to Mayank explaining my thought process when inviting him. So he kind of agreed with me. He said, okay. I do reply to letters quite diligently, by the way. Sanjay Gadale says Mohandas Pai was obtrusive. His body language and tone was too parochial to accommodate on your session. He did not allow anyone to speak, and he should have been asked to not interrupt and cross-talk many times. That's something which I thought that maybe we should say before itself, that don't cross-talk.
I think we are used to people not doing that.
This one we expected. Maybe we should have made the ground rules clear. Next line by Sanjay, I do not agree. He said, I would like to see how Abhinandan handles him. We also can handle him. But the point is, as I told Mohandas Pai himself, that we want it to be a non-argumentative podcast where we do want to listen to some of the points. I mean, like for example, where he talked about 41% evolution, Tara did say, no, that's not right. And Tara was factual. Yeah. So that's all we can do, right? Jyoti Chandranath, big fan of Dhanya and Pooja's work. I came to know about News Minute via Newslaundry, and since then I have been following your work. I really appreciate Pooja's work on Orwell, which I think the BJP RS is going to take over pretty soon. If you guys have read the story, then do watch the video. In the comment section, Pooja is getting either
extreme love or extreme
hate, but the video is doing quite well.
But both are welcome. Keep them coming.
Yeah. So now Jyoti Chandra says, the recent South Central episode where Mr. Pai was a guest, I felt he completely hijacked the episode, and you two were like nice kids listening to a Doddappa. Okay. He did make some sense, but it definitely felt like an entitled view. I guess these kind of people will project the show in bad light. Okay. Niyati Bhasin, she has written about AI. She said that I appreciate that you guys are a small team and depending on subscribers, and sometimes you have to make hard choices. However, about AI, it is trained on plagiarized past investigative work by journalists. AI art specifically is very damaging for artists. We had a short discussion on this where Pooja had said that sometimes also because of lack of money that we use certain AI images.
We can't source all images and videos, but we try and avoid. We keep it to the minimum.
So she's saying, do your stories without that art. I'm sure other subscribers will understand. You are subscriber funded. When you can afford to have artists on your payroll, you can add art to your stories. So one thing, Niyati, is that yes, subscribers do fund us, but is that enough for us? No, we need at least I would say 2,000 more subscribers. Imagine a country of this many millions. I need 2,000 more subscribers.
No.
I need like 2,000 more subscribers every month to make sure that I don't have to depend on anyone. So we do need more subscribers. But I take your point. I will speak to the video editors and others.
In principle, we agree. We too are opposed to usage of AI.
Yeah.
But we just, where we absolutely cannot help and avoid is where we've been using. But of course, that too can be avoided further.
Okay, now two more letters. Suresh K. I have been watching your weekly show for quite some time now. Now, one thing I liked about the letters is a lot of people have been writing saying, I watch it every week. This week has been tiresome. So I'm just happy that people have been watching. Suresh says, I had never any intention of writing to you till now. The reason for writing to you is because I got confused whether I was watching mainstream Godi media. The way Mr. Pai was putting his points across. He was spinning out statistics from the top of his imaginary hat. And when he was questioned on this statistics, he was pontificating from a high pedestal or just shouting out the other panelist. Okay, I think he's better suited for Republic TV, not here. Regarding the governor issue, he got all the basics wrong. And Suresh says, he wanted to be condescending, but he came through as only being obstinate. You guys were polite to a fault that was unnecessary.
I think Dhanya and I, at least, we've been in TV. We were in that mode. Here, we are just too polite and too civil. We do meditation.
We do feel like that, Leena, we are very polite people now.
I mean, maybe not so much to each other.
I've listened about your stories in the history, and I think you're far more polite now.
Yeah, we are very polite. Yeah. Okay, last letter. Raman says, I found Mohandas Pai approach to be overly aggressive and preachy. He seemed to think that South Central was a TV debate. He presented selective examples and made personal attacks. I do appreciate the variety of viewpoints your podcast presents. I think you should bring people like Mohandas Pai to the podcast so that they're exposed for what they are. It is surprising that he finally backtracked. Dhanya's comment on his comments on his recommendation was a killer. Oh, I think it is about delimitation. But I think Mohandas Pai has had a consistent view on delimitation that South India will suffer because of it. And Raman also says he was impressed by the thoughtful and balanced perspectives of Tara and Shabir. Their measured responses, respectful tone made the discussion engaging and insightful. Thank you very much. So I understand the dilemma which a lot of South Central viewers had. Even our own colleagues were asking us why. But see, sometimes we do have to listen to the other side. I won't call them the other side. And we don't have politicians, right? So it's a choice for us to bring people who may disagree in certain points. It may be taxing, but it's important.
But on startups, he is a subject matter expert.
Yeah.
He's
No,
a
that
venture
everybody is
capitalist,
agreeing.
yeah. So he stayed on for the other topic too, whether you agree with him or not. But we did call him as a subject matter expert for that topic. So, yeah.
Correct. Okay, so keep those. Yeah, Leena?
Good thing is that you got to know that so many people regularly watch you, and they were
and we are
they
very
took up the pen and finally
happy
wrote
about
to
it.
you.
Now I want to ask you, was this a trick to make people write to you? So many people who kept saying that I never thought I'll write, but here I am.
But you should write. In fact, I was telling Pooja that I want all readers, maybe we'll start a segment where they can send us their pet cat or pet dog pictures, because I saw the Ken was also doing it. And I think it's wonderful, right? We should get to know our readers
Because
more.
we're a community at the end of the day, right?
Exactly. So keep the letters coming. It's southcentral@thenewsminute.com. Now for recommendations from Pooja.
Okay, I have two things to recommend this week. One is an article from the New Yorker from November 2024. It's called "Should a Country Speak a Single Language?" Very relevant to the conversation we had today. Second one, in continuation of that, Janki Nair's book, The Promise of a Metropolis, Bangalore's 20th Century. Slightly voluminous, slightly expensive. It's on discount on Amazon if you want to buy.
And this book is quoted extensively in Anisha's story on that insider versus outsider battle, which again is a really good piece of journalism, I believe. So do read that.
I'd actually recommend a comic, James Acaster, British comic, very funny. He has a show called Repertoire on Netflix, which is a mother special with 4 specials. Recognize, Reset, Recap, something, another one, forgot. Very funny comic. He's not on social media at all. He's only available either on British shows or on British cooking shows or on his website, jamesacaster.com. Love that comic. Look up to him. Very cool, very amazing, very fast also, insane. I'll recommend a Kannada movie, which is Sarkari Hiye Prathamika Shale Kasargodu. Love that movie. Popular Rishabh Shetty. So nice political, nice topics there. It's about a school in Kasargodu which wants to have Kannada and students learn in the mother tongue. That is nice. There is a book I'll recommend, recently picked up at Blossoms, Chikama Travels Private Limited, which is a Bengaluru based
That mystery thing.
Yeah, I read like 8 pages. I'm like very impressed. So I'm reading it right now. I'm reading another book called Show Your Work by Ashton Kleon. It is very nice, artsy. That's all. Good night. Thank you so much.
Yeah, because we are talking so much about assimilation, I think I'll recommend Neha Dikshit's The Many Lives of Saida X that she just launched a few months back. An amazing book of a migrant woman and her life in Delhi, trying to eke out a living.
Anisha.
Okay, I'll recommend 2 books. One I'm reading is Malegalalli Madhumagalu by Kuempu, which I haven't yet finished. I'm on my last 100 pages. There's an English translation if anybody wants to read it in English. And the second book I would like to recommend is On Earth We Were Briefly Gorgeous by this writer called, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Ocean Vuong. He is Vietnamese, heritage, American, something like that. But it's an amazing and beautiful lyrical book. So have fun.
My recommendation, I have 2 books that I wanted to recommend. One is Alejandro Zambra's Childish Literature, which Zambra is a Chilean author, and I've enjoyed pretty much everything that he's written. This is sort of a set of essays on parenthood, which he writes sort of to his child, and there are other kinds of essays in it as well, which I really enjoyed. And the second book I wanted to recommend is, and this is someone who's written for Newsminute in the past, is Lavanya Mohan's Money Doesn't Grow on Trees. That's coming out on May 12th, and if you guys would like to pre-order, you can. I don't say that merely because she's my wife, but also because I think you enjoy reading it.
Yeah, and Lavanya was called Rupi Rani for us. Yeah, she had written a column on how women can save money and how women should look at finances. A column which I should have read every week properly. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Suhrith. And the book I want to recommend, I have not read the book, but I've read an article about the book and I'm very curious about it. It's called What's It Like to Be a Bird? It's a book by David Allen Sibley. Apparently the books, I read an article in NPR on it. It says that a bird's experience is far richer and complex than what we thought. So calling somebody a bird's brain or, it's actually a compliment. Pooja and your bird brain, if I say, it's actually a compliment is what the book will eventually tell you.
I anyway took it as a compliment on these days.
So basic, if you are a bird lover, you should definitely read this book is what NPR says, and I'm going to also read that. So that's...
Pigeons too?
I will never say anything about any bird, any animal, because once I did and I got trolled so badly.
Really? But I don't know what redeeming
I said something about
bats.
Like why are bats there? And that's
But people can tell us, I really don't know what redeeming quality a pigeon has. If you think
my
it has
cat
some purpose.
eats pigeons. Therefore,
So it's
that's
cat
a redeeming.
food?
Yes, it is cat food. I have a
They
cat.
wake me up in the morning. The
Yeah, see?
fights. I love
I
it.
like watching pigeons.
I really
Watch,
love it.
they barely move.
No, they
They're
don't
all
move.
obese.
Me and my cats actually sit and watch pigeons. Okay, so thank you very much, Bhuvan, our producer, Ajay, Maria Teresa Raju, Jasim Ali, and everybody else who helps the South Central team. Thank you.